and welcome to the Wormhole Podcast, episode 81, bringing on an author and talking with them about one, occasionally more, of their books in detail. I'm Charlie Place, and today I am joined by Nicolai Houm, whose books have been received to critical acclaim in Norway. We'll be talking today about the Gradual Disappearance of Jane Ashland, which was published in translation by Pushkin Press. Jane from Wisconsin is lying in a tent on a mountain all alone in Norway. It may be unlikely that she survives this. We move through particular events of particular parts of her life, her work as a fiction writer and teacher, her husband and daughter, who we very much later find out have died. Events also include Jane's search for distant relatives in Norway and the climbing up a mountain with fellow aeroplane passenger Ulf. It's a short book, a little under 200 pages, but the content could easily fill 1,000. Let's see how much of that content we can get to in this relatively short amount of time. Hello, Nicolai.
Hi.
Amazing to have you here. I'm going to get straight to the inspiration because I haven't been able to find out all that much about it online. That may be because I can't speak Norwegian. It's only English I can read.
Yep.
And it seems important to know. Can I ask you, go into it, the inspiration?
For me, it was kind of a internal, personal kind of issue, I guess, that made me start writing it. I have a daughter, and at the time I started, my daughter was kind of young, and at that age where you as a parent worry a lot. And for me, it was kind of treating my own fear of something happening to my closest family. I guess we all feel that as parents, just that fear, which is numbing and which preoccupies you a lot. Is something going to happen to your kids? What is the worst that could happen? And I guess I just felt the need to treat that fear. And for me, as a fiction writer, it's the natural way to treat stuff like that is writing about it, of course. And there's a lot of energy in that topic, I guess. We have an expression in Norwegian is, as fiction writers, we say, go to where the fire is or go to where it's burning. I don't know how you would translate that in English, but I guess you understand the meaning of it. Go to where the worry is and the pain is in your life, and that's where you'll find good fiction. And that's how it started, I guess. What would be the worst thing that could happen to me? What's my biggest fear? And that's the fear I have as a father of something happening to my child. I started writing about it.
Well, I mean, it's a valid reason. It unfortunately obviously happens, but has writing about it made you feel more secure in your worries?
Not really, but it's made it easier for me to understand the people who have experienced the loss like that. I could never fully understand it, of course, but it's, I don't know if it's helped me anything, but it felt good to write about it. I guess it's kind of facing your fears too. Researching them, investigating your fears. What is it and how does it function? And I guess you always worry as a parent. That's part of it.
That's a good point. Maybe it made you even more worried by the research.
Probably.
Yeah, no, it's not a nice thing.
We were talking about why I was inspired to write it, but that's not the same thing as what the book is about. It's about dealing with sorrow, I guess, and trying to live on, or maybe not succeeding with living on, which happens too,
Well, no, you say that. I mean, I'm sat here a week after my reread, because I read it originally a few years ago, and I have to admit that I have struggled a little bit to think about and remember, even just last week, how I feel about Jane herself, because I think the message and the meaning of the book was so consuming that I've thought about that so much more. You've got this grief, it's about the way we deal with grief, but in this specific sort of circumstance, this particular sudden loss.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the trauma of not only that, but as we find out what happened altogether in the aftermath, you've also got the trauma from the court case itself, which is something else. Are you able to talk about this aspect as well?
Well, the court case doesn't really take up that much of the book, but it's part of the ordeal for sure. It's a car crash and a traffic accident. It's a drunk driver that kills her husband and daughter. And she actually goes to the prison in the end and visits this guy who's in prison for what's it called in English, involuntary manslaughter or something like that. So but that's not a really big part of the book, but the whole I guess the whole ordeal for her is of course extremely hard. It's all part of the story, I guess, of loss. Not only the accident itself and the sorrow, like the shock and everything, but everything that's in her life for several years after this accident. Writing the part about the court case is pretty short. I found it maybe the most fascinating part of the writing was just the part where she goes to the prison, because she's actually meeting the perpetrator, you know. Like a lot of people that are in prison for doing bad things, they're people too. And she finds pretty quickly that he's a victim too, you know, he's a victim of what he's done. And it's interesting. It's the writing which is dialectic, which is to me a lot more fun than just like a villain and a hero. And here you see that it's complicated, and he's a victim too of this whole situation. I guess I'd like writing stuff like that. It's more interesting than the black and white story.
No, certainly, certainly. I still don't know how to think about it, actually. I definitely want to ask you. You make the decision to have Jane effectively not forgive the person who caused the accident.
She hugs him at the end, or he grabs a hug.
True.
It's 5 seconds long because in this facility you're only allowed to hug for 5 seconds. So it's a brief hug, but she doesn't push him away, and she actually pats his back. And there's a small part, like a paragraph, where she's comparing that hug to comparing her own child. So I feel that, I don't know if she never says I forgive you. He wants her to say that, but she has a hard time saying that. But I think the hug is sort of like she's not leaving with any kind of animosity, and I think he can probably feel that it's okay. Well, it's not okay, but he feels maybe a bit better. He's going crazy in there, and he tries to commit suicide, and he really regrets the whole thing, and he keeps thinking about Julie, the girl that was killed, Jane's daughter, all the time. See, he's in need of help too, even though he's the perpetrator and in jail. And I think she kind of recognizes that in the hug, even though she's really angry at him through the whole visit. There's something about the hug at the end that I think means a lot. It's up to the reader. All this is up to the reader, of course, but that's how I thought about it when I wrote it.
Very, very fascinated there to hear your answer, because I think I didn't see that she didn't completely forgive him, but I think I missed that part of the forgiveness there that you've just discussed. Gosh, where do we go from here? Okay, so we've talked about the trauma and how it informs the novel, and you do have to wait till later to put it all together, which I really like. I really find that interesting. But I found myself that this book is a lot about Jane's search for a replacement family, and effectively, and I think it's poignant that she's looking effectively at one that's far away in both connection, they're distant relatives, but also far away in the location to where she's been. Can you talk about this search for the family, her relatives?
Yeah, because she starts, what's it called in English? Genealogy? Yeah.
Yes.
She starts researching her distant family, and she finds out that she has some distant relatives in Norway, and travels to Norway to meet these people. And I don't really know if it's important to her to find these relatives. I think it's more like trying to grasp onto some kind of last reason to live. So this is more like a hobby. I think I wrote that someone told her that you should take up something, some kind of hobby or something that can preoccupy you. I think it's more or less a coincidence that she starts with this. What are my roots? It's like, I have a feeling that she doesn't really care about anything anymore, that the trauma is so big and the loss is so great that she's kind of just holding on. And she's like, why not take up this genealogy thing and go visit someone in Norway? I don't care, you know? That's how I feel that she's thinking. And you can tell when she's both in her inner monologue, but also in dialogue, that she's kind of, I don't care, you know? She's drinking a lot. She's taking pills. She's just like in a mess, you know? I never thought that the whole traveling to Norway was like a mission to find meaning. I think she's just, I don't care, and I might as well go there. And I find that refreshing. It's just that whole I don't give a shit attitude. That probably would be my reaction to if everything went really wrong in my life. I'd be like, I don't know what kind of words I can use on your podcast, but there's an F word that's really tempting to say right now. That's also a kind of fun perspective to write from when you're writing about something as sad and serious as a loss like this. It's kind of good to flip it around and make it fun by making her someone who doesn't care, who's given up. And that colors the language and what happens to her. And she keeps messing things up more because she's already given up and she doesn't care. That's how I thought about the whole venture to Norway and meeting this guy on the plane that she goes with to the mountains. This researcher, is it muskox? Muskox? Yeah.
I think you call it musk oxen,
Musk.
or at least the translation
Yeah,
does.
okay.
Well, that was interesting to hear.
Yeah.
I'm going to say I agree and then disagree, which sounds odd because I'm talking to the author. But here we go. I completely got the whole loss thing and like, don't want to do anything. It's done. You know, you said you want to use the F word. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then as we find out about her family, I was seeing that maybe she was trying to replace her family, maybe.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because what happens is she's come to Norway because she's got kind of like a punk attitude. It's like, I don't care, I might as well go to Norway, smoking her cigarettes and drinking and all that. But once she comes to Norway and meets this family, there's a daughter here, and she's, I can't remember her age, is 13, 14,
I think so, yeah.
which is a problem, because Jane will immediately identify and feel the love again for this young relative. So that's something I discovered, that I started out like placing Jane in Norway for no really good reason, but it becomes really important to her because she is more or less ends up trying to replace that whole insider with this, at least with a young daughter in the family. And that becomes really complicated because she's not her mother. She's a really distant relative, and she's drunk and she's in someone else's house as a guest. So it's becomes complicated fast.
The narrative is kind of from Jane's perspective, but then we've got an interesting narrative. I will ask you about that in a bit because I love the writing. We get a vague sense of what's going wrong for this connection with her family.
Yeah.
But she isn't a good guest. She does effectively get chucked out at the end.
Yeah, she does. She's kind of a creepy guest, I guess, which is also interesting to write about, because she doesn't see herself as creepy. Most people don't. She's just very sad and destroyed by her sorrow, and self-medicating and doing a lot of weird stuff just because she's lost. It starts out all right, and they're welcoming and all, but I guess it's her drinking too, which kind of complicates stuff.
They seem a very nice family, yeah. They seem good.
Yeah, good family, maybe too good. It's hard to be in a situation like Jane is, where you're struggling a lot and you're not doing things perfectly, and yeah, you're making a mess. And I guess that's harder when you're visiting a very well-functioning family. The daughter is a gymnast, elite gymnast. Both the parents are holding good jobs, and the house is perfect, immaculate. And Jane shows up like a human wreck, which it doesn't make it easier for her, I guess.
I've written this down so that I can read it out properly. For listeners, this is from the English translation as well as the advanced reader copy, so it might be slightly different in the published version. And this is from Jane's point of view, effectively dialogue. She says, "My novels deal with the way we see ourselves reflected in the eyes of others, while remaining fundamentally alone, and how we always long to become something more than just one being." Nicolai, it strikes me that this book, this story, is like one that Jane could have written herself.
Yeah, when she describes the books she has written, she also writes kind of bleak, I guess, the books she describes. I think also I've described Jane's life some places as a pretty lonely childhood and searching for some kind of connection, which is what she is doing in her books as well. She has stopped writing too, because she doesn't believe in anything anymore. And to write fiction or to work with art of any kind, I guess you have to feel that life has a meaning. It's sort of what you can do when all other needs are taken care of, and she doesn't care about anything anymore. So she stopped writing, which kind of brings us back to why she's going to Norway.
With this, I thought it was interesting that, was this from an interview or her thoughts herself? I can't remember. She talks about how her life is fact in terms of her work and her family, and everything else is fiction.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a very literary way of bringing in this effective disappearance and her lack of care.
Yeah, it's a little snippet of an interview, like an old interview. It's where someone is interviewing her about her authorship, and she answers just that. Family is real, and Greg and Julie are real, and the rest is fiction, which is, it's interesting how, because the person interviewing her is trying to make her writing really important. How can you write with a husband, a family? How do you find time? And she's like, well, fiction is one thing, but they're the most important thing to me. I think the interviewer is looking for like a feminist answer. She comes back with, well, my family is more important than my fiction. And I guess that's me shining through too, that it's important for me to write, and literature is important to me, but I know what's more important for sure. And I would say the same as Jane.
Yeah, yeah. And that brings me to something else that I wanted to pick up on with the writing. The narrative, you've got different tenses and effective persons.
Mm-hmm.
There's a point where we switch to dialogue and you haven't used quotation marks. And it's as if the dialogue is still in the same voice as the effective narrator, I suppose, so to speak. Can you talk about your use of language? I suppose also, where does the book begin and you end, or you begin?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's at least what I really enjoy doing is, you say free indirect discourse? Is that an expression in
Yeah, no, it works.
At least you're writing in the third person, but you're getting so close to the protagonist, to their thoughts, that it's really it could have been first person. There's no real difference. And I like writing in third person, but as close to the protagonist as possible. So at points you don't really know, is this the narrator, or is this Jane herself talking? Is this dialogue or monologue, or is it just her thoughts? And I can get to points where the difference is so slight, between these levels in my writing. And I really enjoy mixing that up. But it has to work. You can't suddenly lose your what's it called, quotation marks, and
yes,
yeah,
yep.
The reader has to know what's going on, I guess. But I like just coming so close to those borders between what is dialogue and what is inner thought. And it keeps it refreshing for me, I guess, to write, to experiment with that sort of stuff. And I'm myself more preoccupied with form than content. I like a good story, and I believe there should be a plot, and I respect the reader's need to have something that encourages them to read on. But I also just really, really love working with language and form, and that's I guess my main goal. It doesn't always look like it, because I can get into the plot too. The Jane Ashland book it inspires reading by making you wonder what happened here, because I keep waiting to tell the whole story. So that part is kind of plot driven, but at the same time, for me, what makes it interesting for me is the form, for sure.
I wondered if you might say something like that, yes. I mean, just the fact that there's this, I think it's just two sentences of second person. Oh my goodness, I was all over it, because I love reading the second person. But yes, you have got so much in the narrative and the use of language, and then you have got this layer of what I thought was effectively maybe you, and then you've got the layer of Jane.
Yeah.
My own fault at not being able to remember Jane did make me think, again, it's more plot rather than character necessarily. I'll go back to Jane a little bit. Why was she a writer?
Wow, I haven't thought of that too much, why she ended up being a writer. It's, of course, it's easy to make the protagonist the same as you are yourself, because then it's you get a lot for free, because you know how her everyday life is. But also I had to make her someone who thinks a lot. A real estate agent, of course, has the same depth of sorrow and experiences the same trauma, but maybe doesn't have the same kind of language to describe it. So I needed some kind of protagonist here who has the words for what she's experiencing. It's really hard, I guess, to make sorrow and loss an interesting theme in a book if the main person can't describe anything. Then you end up with just the reactions and the actions, but not the words to describe why she's doing what she's doing. She wouldn't have to be a writer. She could have been an editor, or maybe someone at least who has the words to describe how she's feeling.
That's interesting. And you've made me think of how you have got this balance of so much description from her, which I suppose I'm kind of putting together with what you've said about her being a writer and being able to express things. But also there is this vagueness in the text as well that keeps you away from seeing exactly what's happening for a while and everything. Yeah,
I think I did all that more to make it interesting to read. So you would have kind of a mystery, So you meet this woman who's in the mountains in Norway, and she doesn't know where she is. She's starving, she's freezing. That's how the novel starts. And all of that is just, I guess, plot stuff to make a mystery. And I do that a lot. I write books that that kind of trick people into reading them. If you go for like a thriller or a crime book, you're there for just the plot, and the plot itself is enough.
Yeah.
But this is kind of a different use of plot, where you use the plot to trick readers in to be able to tell them something else, I guess. I like that way of using plot. It gives the reader something, and it's not trickery. It's fun to follow the plot, but you also, yeah, make it interesting to read the book, and then you get a chance to do something with form and language that might entertain people at the same time, or to deliver some kind of message or thought or meaning that you've been struggling with and want to tell someone about.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, then a different character. Is it pronounced Ulf?
Yeah, Ulf. Yeah, yeah.
Ulf. What's the reason for him as such, as a character in the novel?
There's a lot of action around Ulf, I guess, because he's a outdoorsy type, and he goes to see this musk oxen and brings Jane along. So it makes for a lot of action, or things that happen in the book. But the main reason with Ulf is to show how much she misses her husband who has died. Because Ulf, at least to me, is not really a cool guy. He's pretty lame once you get to know him. So I think I placed him there to kind of to show how much she actually misses Greg, and how good Greg was, what a great guy he was. And this is Jane kind of trying to. She meets this guy on the plane, and she's willing to go camping with him, more or less. I don't know if she's really trying to hook up. I don't think so. She's not there, but at least she's interested in someone, in another human being, which is good, because Jane is turning into a nihilist, more or less. So that's what the book is also about, is Jane just totally losing it and not being interested in life. So it's a good thing, I guess, that she shows some kind of interest for this Ulf, or Ulf, as you would say in Norwegian. It doesn't really work out with Ulf at all. It's just like visiting the Norwegian relatives, and it's even more dramatic because she ends up being abandoned in the Norwegian mountains in a storm by this Ulf. But yeah, the answer, I guess, is she's there to show what Jane is missing in a man.
He definitely wanted to hook up with her, I think, certainly.
Yeah, he's keen, but yep, she's not.
I kind of feel, while you're saying stuff, and I'm thinking, should I be asking, should we care about where Ulf has gone? And I'm thinking, actually, I don't think we need to.
No.
I don't know if you feel differently, if we need to know where Ulf went or anything.
Yeah, he just took off, didn't he? But he leaves her in the mountains. But in the end, she sees that once the fog clears and the storm is gone, she sees that she's pretty close to the highway, or to the national road going through the park there. So Ulf never meant to harm her or leave her or abandon her. He thought that, okay, I'm just taking off because I can't take any more of this obnoxious woman. So he just takes off, and I don't think he had any ill will. Actually, was just getting tired of this woman. Should we care about where Ulf goes? No, not really. He goes back to being the researcher and a dorky guy, I guess, and maybe he'll find another woman that likes him. I don't know. Probably not. But no, he's not really a character I care too much about either. He's supposed to be someone you don't care about.
I think I got some of that in reading, and definitely with our conversation, I'm thinking certainly. Yeah, he's kind of a character. I mean, he's important as a character, and at the same time, yeah, he's kind of not as well. He serves a purpose, I suppose.
Yeah, kind of like a braggy guy with his kind of like a chauvinist too, I guess. And Jane doesn't like him at all. I hope that comes through to the reader as well, that she doesn't.
No, I think it does. Yeah, definitely. You have mentioned the highway, and we've talked about the musk oxen. Can I ask you about the use of nature and the musk oxen themselves? Why it was important to use them?
Wow, why did I do that? A lot of these questions are hard to answer because the process of writing a novel, at least for me, is not as conscious as you might think. A lot of things just pop up as I go along, and I like that kind of freedom. I don't plot everything in advance. Often I know how it's going to end, and I have a start, of course, and then a lot of things can happen. I don't think I started writing the book thinking that Jane was going to go on a safari in the Norwegian mountains, which is a kind of odd thing to do. Why did I do that? I don't know. Again, it's kind of entertaining and fun to write because it's just a weird thing to do, to go see some strange animal in the way up in the Norwegian mountains. So again, it might be because I get easily bored when I write. There needs to be something fun and exciting and just odd to make me interested. But also I knew there was going to be some kind of dramatic situation towards the end. And these are really big, really dangerous animals. There's like an average 2 or 3 tourists every year that get injured in confrontations with these. Yeah, because they look like really big sheep and they don't look that dangerous. People walk up to them and they just get headbutted. So it's a serious animal. They're really defensive. So I knew that it was going to end with some kind of drama. And we don't have a lot of dramatic animals in Norway or a lot of dramatic situations. It's such a safe country. So maybe put her up there with a musk oxen.
That is maybe the most compelling and complex answer I've had that starts with the words, I don't know. Thank you for that. That was awesome. No, I liked it.
I think fiction writers, a lot of the time, they don't know. It's sometimes kind of hard to admit that. It makes you sound like an amateur, but it's also the fun part about writing is that you don't know. You start out at one point and you might know where it's going to end, but you don't know what's going to happen along the way. And if I plotted everything, like I have colleagues that do, that especially the ones that write crime, plot everything down to the last scene, but I would just die of boredom if I worked like that. I have to have some kind of X factor, some kind of unknown in there that makes it interesting for me too. So at what stage the whole musk oxen theme became a part of the book, I can't really remember, but I'm sure I must have written 30, 40 pages before I even got that idea. And once I got the idea, then I go all in. I went up there myself and slept in a tent for like a week and I got to see the musk. They're hard. Some people are lucky and they, just driving in your car through the park and you see like 20 of them, and others go there several times and never see any animals. But I was like semi lucky. I stumbled upon 6 of them. That was fun, and just researching what it looks like up there. And I had talked to a guy that he's not Ulf because he was a nice guy and an interesting guy. But that's where I got the idea that Jane has to meet someone up there. That's how it started. I had written maybe 30, 40 pages about Jane going to Norway. And then I'm like, yeah, she has to do something in Norway. She can't just sit in this house with this family. She has to go on some kind of adventure. And then the musk oxen came into the picture. And then while researching the musk oxen, I came across a musk oxen researcher, a scientist. And I was like, this is a pretty interesting character. I wonder what it would be like if he was not sympathetic and if he was like a jerk. That would be a really good character for a book. So that's how I worked with this novel. It's some coincidences along the way that which make it interesting for me too.
That's interesting to hear. I had wondered reading it if the musk oxen or some sort of nature animals was maybe something that you were personally interested in rather than finding it and then researching it. So on the musk oxen, I'm going to ask you about the last paragraph of the book, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So Jane, she sees the highway, but she also walks towards the musk oxen. Why did you end it like that, I suppose is my question.
Yeah, it's sort of like a almost open ending. You don't know what's going to happen, so it's open in that sense. But as a Norwegian, you'll know that it's not a good thing to do, and it's a kind of a bit suicidal. This Ulf character, he says a lot of things, and most of the things he says just aggravate or irritate Jane. But there's one thing he mentions that she finds really interesting and that kind of talks to her situation. And that's the fact that the female, the mother musk oxens, they form a defensive circle around their calves when they're threatened. And Ulf tells her about this defensive circle formation that the mothers in the flock form. She, of course, because of her backstory with losing her daughter, she finds this really interesting. And this is, I guess, the only part of the musk oxen thing that she finds interesting. And she talks to Ulf about this, like, can we see this defensive formation? And he kind of ridicules her because to see it, you'd have to aggravate the animals, you'd have to threaten them. And then we leave that theme and there's not much more talk about it. But the end of the novel brings that back to the reader, because it's like, is she actually going towards this flock of really big animals to see their defensive formation and to kind of provoke that behavior, which is super dangerous. They'll headbutt you if you walk too close, but if you try to make them protect their calves, it's not going to end good. I don't write that this is what she's doing, but the reader can speculate that that's what she's about to do. But she's also delirious, because she hasn't eaten for several days. She hasn't had any any sleep. She's going into hypothermia. So it is an open end. If you want to believe that Jane makes it, it's possible, because she's seen that the road is pretty close. The fog is lifted, and she does walk towards the flock. But how close is she going to walk? That's where I leave it up to the reader.
That's interesting. That I hadn't put the bit of what the musk oxen do to protect their children. I hadn't put that into it. But yeah, so it's kind of going along with this theme of family and Jane still kind of looking for them in a way. Can I ask what you think happens at the end? Your personal belief. Do you have one?
Yeah, it's weird because I think I kind of leave it open too, because it's so sad for me who, I've been writing for 2 years about this person. I'm like just going to kill her at the end. It doesn't feel good. So I think I kind of left it open for myself too. Sometimes I think it goes wrong, and sometimes I think she survives. It's kind of depending on my mood. To me, she's coming home in a sense. She's gone to Norway to try to connect with people again. Is this Jane trying to connect with at least something living? To me, that's, I think, what the end is about, that she's lost all hope of connecting with other humans. But she's like, okay, I'll walk over there. I understand their thing, they'll do anything to protect their offspring. And that's what I think I was thinking about when I wrote that end.
No, it's the disappearance. Yeah, it's where the disappearance comes in, I suppose, to its conclusion.
Yep.
Yeah. You mentioned Jane's parents. How did they affect who she is and who she was, etc.?
Yeah, there's a bit about it in the book, not much, but they're not really loving, her parents. And when she meets Greg, she realizes what loving parents can be like. So how it affects her, I guess it makes her someone who puts a lot of importance in her own little family, and she's going to do this in a different way. She is managing to do it in a different way. She loves Greg and she loves her daughter more than anything, which makes it, I guess, even more sad that she loses him, because she has this ambition that she's going to be a better mother than her mom was. And both Greg and her have an ambition to be better parents than the previous generation. And they succeed. It's a good family life. And she's writing her novels, and Greg is working on his thing, and they're making it work. And it's a nice life where they have a lot of love between them.
I like how you had Greg's parents in there as well, showing contrast, and also I think there were a couple of similarities, but not too many. And yeah, no, I liked how you had both those there. So we have discussed the ending, so we're going to go to a different question entirely. I know that when I was first reaching out to contact you, I was told that you were on travels, and then you were actually come back from your travels. That's why we're doing this today. Can you tell us about your travels?
Yeah, I surf a lot. When I'm not writing, I like to go surfing, like on waves, not with the sail and everything, but just surfing. And I'd been dreaming of doing like one big trip and go to all the places that I've only read about: Indonesia and Sri Lanka, Morocco, El Salvador, Costa Rica, all those surf countries, and just enjoy surfing. So I actually took a whole year off of work. I work as an editor of children's literature, and I saved up a lot of money and took a year off, and just went surfing. And my daughter is 19 now, so she went to university and in another city, and this was like the first chance to do something like that in a long time. And while I was traveling, I understood how important the writing is to me, and so I quit my job while I was out there. So now, and came back to just now I'm going to try to survive as an author. So big changes, and it's hard, of course, in any country to survive as an author. But I feel it's time to really go for it and see what happens.
And as I said to you before we started recording, I'm really happy to hear that, because I wondered if this question I'm going to ask you in a minute would have a not sure answer or anything like that. So can you tell us what you're writing?
Yeah, it's actually another story which takes place in both the States and in Norway. Totally different though. It's a historic novel about a Norwegian who goes to New York in 1861. He ends up going to the Civil War, actually, and fighting on the Union side. But he's not a regular soldier. He travels to the States to become a landscape painter, like artist. He falls in love. He meets this girl. Her parents want him to go to war. There were a lot of Scandinavians that went. They weren't even citizens of the United States, but they went and fought for the Union side anyway because they believed in the new country and democracy and all. So he's one of those guys, but he's a pacifist and he's not really into this at all. Her parents pressure him to go, but he finds a way of doing it like his own way of going to war, which is interesting because there was something called the Bohemian Army, which was 20 or 30 guys that would go to the front and they would sketch what they were seeing. They were artists. And these sketches were sent to the illustrated newspapers on the East Coast. So, you see all those wood etchings. Is that what it's called in English?
Yes. Yeah.
In old newspapers of war scenes. There was actually someone, of course, out there sketching it and sending it via telegram or via horse or whatever to New York. And then they'd make the illustrations for the newspapers. So this character of mine, he goes into the Bohemian Army as an artist. And it's a pretty harsh thing, actually. He's only at the front for like a week, and then he ends up in Andersonville, which was a horrific prison camp for like prisoners of war. A lot of the book is going to be about life in Andersonville. It's pretty distressing topic, but and it's not. There hasn't been a lot about it. It's kind of like a forgotten part of the American Civil War is the prison camps they had, where some of them were just horrible. So this character of mine, he's struggling to survive there at the moment. That's where I'm at in the manuscript right now.
Right, okay. Well, it sounds great. I was going to ask, how are you doing with it? So can we expect a publication in the near future, sort of near future?
Yeah, it's there's always, I'm writing in Norwegian, and there's always the question of if it's going to be translated.
Yeah.
The Gradual Disappearance of Jane Ashland is the only book for grown-ups I have that has been translated into the English. So it's always a question of whether it's going to be translated or not. I always hope so, of course. We're only 5 million people in Norway, so it's good to reach more readers for sure.
That would be fantastic. Maybe it needs a kind of, he's written another novel, please translate it to Pushkin or something. Yeah. So, Nicolai, this has been phenomenal having you. I'm going to be waiting to see if that book's translated and published, definitely. And I'll keep a lookout for the Norwegian publication anyway and see about doing a shout out for it. Thank you very much for coming on today and talking about the book.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Do join me next time. The Wormhole Podcast, episode 81, was recorded on the 22nd of June and published on the 28th of August, 2023. Music and production by Charlie Place.